I want to finish off a little bit what we were discussing beforehand. The pasuk in the Torah says that Hashem saw everything that He created, v'hinei tov ma'od, and it was very, very good. And the Medrash says, v'hinei tov, when He looked at it and saw it as good, that's the yetzer tov, that's a person's yearning and desires for good in this world, for connection to God. Ma'od, but He saw the world was very good. What makes it very good? The Medrash says, yetzer hora. That's the person's yetzer hora. And what we've been exploring is his drive for, let's just call it simply, his drive for physicality, for non-spiritual things. So the Medrash says, can a yetzer hora be very good? And the Medrash says, definitely. And it goes on to explain how. And what we've been exploring together really is how a person harnesses their yetzer hora, latches it onto their drive for goodness to make them exceptional. With the yetzer tov alone, you can be good, but it lacks impetus and energy and drive to actually take you all the way or be consistent and go for the length of your life. But when you marry it with the yetzer hora, with the drives that we have in our lives, so then you can become exceptional, literally great in your service to Hashem, and that's what the Medrash is saying. So that's what we've explored together. What we never explored was two drives inside of a person, which the Vilna Gaon says it's also for a person to use those as the driving force in their life. These you may not attach and bring them into your service to Hashem as the engine room that drives your service to Hashem. He says those two drives are a drive for woman and a drive for food. Now, those are essential components of our service to God. I'm not taking that away. If you would take food out of a Jew's life, I'm just saying, yeah, exactly. But truthfully, what would happen to the joy of Shabbos and the joy of Yom Tov? What would be a wedding? What would be... So, food is an essential ingredient of our service to God, but it can never be at the center and the driving force and motivation for our service to Hashem. The same thing with the sexual drive. It's a fundamental part of being Jewish, fundamental. To have a wife, to have children, to build a family. It's hard to understand Jewish life without that. But it's not the sexual drive inside a person. The Vilna Gaon says can never be the central drive of your life. It can't be that that's what you are looking for in your life. That just creates, those two drives are forbidden for a person, a Jewish person, to put as the cherry on top, as the icing, the energy drive, the engine room of your life. Okay? And the Rambam says that many mitzvahs of the Torah were written purely to keep those two drives in check. If you think how many restrictions there are for a Jewish person overeating, and how many restrictions there are for a Jewish person to be intimate even with his own wife, all of that is to make sure that these drives, which are fundamental to life, they're essential, but they're kept in the right department and quantity in your life, and their place in your life is moved from the center to the sideshow. And the Torah does that unbelievably effectively with all the mitzvahs that Hashem put in order to quench and quieten the drive for food and the drive for sexuality that a person has. So what I want to share with you today, and hopefully next week as well, is really an unbelievable section in the Torah, which is dealing with how a person who has these as their central drive moves them. How do you move it out of the way in order that more productive drives can actually take the fore in your life and you can become an exceptional servant to Hashem? And that's really what I want to explore today. I think for me, it's been a fascinating journey. It started because I was giving a share. I'll give you a bit of background. I was giving this share somewhere else. And after, not this one, the section about like using your yetzer hora to move you. And I mentioned this Vilna Gaon, and somebody came to me afterwards, and they said to me, but what happens if your central drive in your life, he happened to say, is food? And I didn't know what to say because I couldn't relate to it. It wasn't mine, but it was like a fascinating question. Like I had a person here who actually had to work on actually how do I get you to move that to the side and actually move healthier things into the middle of your life. And it began a process of research for me in the Torah to try and understand how does the Torah get you out of this issue? And it really has been was the byproduct of his question, a lot of what I'm going to share with you today. As background, we're going to come back to it, but I need you to have in the back of your head that we learned together in Shmona Prakim many, many months ago that the Rambam says that there's a certain line that a person has in his midas relating to a person's pursuit of money. And it has two extremes to it, and it has a center. The center is always the ultimate place to be, and the two extremes are the place where he says you're sick, your soul's sick, it needs to be worked on. That line in the midas of pursuing money, on the one extreme, he says is chemdas mammon, which is your desire and chasing for money. On the other extreme, does everybody remember, Daniel? Laziness, atzlus is laziness. And the ultimate place to be in the middle is something, a midah called simcha b'chelkoi, being contented with what you have. Okay, those three things go together. Now, chemdas mammon, what it does, chemdas mammon makes you a workaholic. That's what it does. It's the yearning, endless yearning for money makes you work your life away, your family away, your time away, your Torah away, everything. It consumes your life with work. On the flip side of that, laziness is you don't want to lift a finger. Nothing will make you do any work. And in the middle is something called simcha b'chelko, which means you work enough to provide for the needs that you have and create the platform for the spiritual life that you need. But it's actually the byproduct of this midah is the volume switch on how much work you do in your life. Are you happy with that? Okay. That's the background. Okay. Now I want to share with you an incredible Mishnah. We're going to explore it over at least 2 weeks, but it's unbelievable. It's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, it's the second chapter of Pirkei Avos, second Mishnah, and it says as follows: Rabban Gamliel beno shel Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi oimer. Rabban Gamliel, the son of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, taught the following thing: Yafe Talmud Torah im derech eretz. How magnificent is the learning of Torah together with earning a livelihood. Sheyagias shnayim mishakachas avon. Because exerting yourself in both of these endeavors causes sin to be forgotten in your life, not to be found in your life. Okay? Good. Now, I'm not going to read the whole Mishnah. It's not necessary for now. But let me ask you guys. You guys all learn and you all work, so none of you do aveiros. As the Mishnah says, if you work and you learn, you don't do aveiros. So it's tzaddikim. It doesn't work, the Mishnah.
It's a lot less than you would if you didn't.
But it doesn't even say. It says mishakachas avos. It's going to be gone.
For that time, you're working and learning.
Okay, good. So we've got terutzim now. Okay, for 2 terutzim so far, my brother. The first is you'll do less. That's a bit of a lav dafka in the Mishnah. The Mishnah doesn't say you'll do less. It says avon will not be found. So then Dan say, no, it means when you're working, when you're learning, you won't do aveiros. As soon as you stop, then they come again.
Or if you do it properly, mate.
What?
Both. Work properly and learn properly.
So you're saying the reason why you work and learn and still do aveiros is because you don't work properly and you don't learn properly.
Because I'll come to a shir, then I'll do a bit of work. Meaning
there's gaps, you say, like my brother saying, there's gaps in your life. So, but what is the Mishnah saying then? According to this theory, is the Mishnah saying that you should either be working or learning or sleeping. That's it. That's life. Now, that's not a life. It just can't exist like that. You do have to stop, Dan. You have to have meals. You have to speak to people. You have to chat to your wife. You have to spend time with your children. Like, it just not, life doesn't function that you have this work, learn, sleep, and then carry on. That doesn't go. Anyway.
And in work, you can still sin. You can still do the bad things.
100%. Even at the workplace, you can sin. So how does it even work? That's you're saying even while you're working, it's not like it doesn't seem like a perfect recipe for a sinless life.
Work, learn, and do mitzvahs.
Well, it doesn't say that. Now, I think the Mishnah was written, I'm just saying, I think the Mishnah was written for real life. It was written for a life where there are curveballs and influences and temptations. And it says, if you want a recipe to deal with those, I've got a recipe for you. Work and learn. Those two things together, Mishakachas Oven will cause sin to be gone.
Is there that it's working?
Yes.
100%.
100%. Okay, 100%. Can mean being a mensch, can mean midas, but here in this context, it means working, because the second half of the Mishnah says, and any Torah which doesn't have melacha, which means work, so the context is definitely about marrying those two things together.
I think it means all oven will be gone. I know it says Mishkachas oven, maybe a specific oven that work and learning it tackles, that it hits that.
Okay, so now that's very interesting. So Dan's saying maybe it's not every Aveira. It doesn't say, first of all, it doesn't say Avoy noise. It doesn't say, it says a certain type of sin will be taken away from you. Maybe it works on a certain type of sin. Okay. So the Maharal asks a lot of these questions on the Mishnah. The first one, which he really asks, is, what means when you're not working and you're not learning? How does this Mishnah work? The first one. The basic is, while you're working, while you're learning, you'll be no Aveiras. But he says, but you're not working and learning all the time. So how does the Mishnah's recipe actually work, amongst other things? And he says it works all the time for you, 24/7, if your recipe in life is Torah with Derech Eretz, and he explains why. I want to explain, we're going to learn today, Rabbeinu Yoina's explanation of this Mishnah is just profound. I'm just telling you, I'm still not sure I understand it 100%, but it certainly took me 10 years to even understand one word of what he was saying, and that for me is like actually the greatest joy of this Rabbeinu Yoina. It's just so hard and so deep. There's so much in it, but you need life to be lived in order to actually understand what he's saying. So he says as follows. First of all, he says, what does the Torah mean when it says that the exertion in both of them causes sin to be forgotten, not found? Kloimar. So already he's going to say Chiddush. Kloimar, what does it mean? It means to say, Meisir yetzer hora. It removes your drive for evil, for bad. So your yetzer hora gets nullified through this process. Now that's already a massive chiddush. The Rabbeinu Yoina's first chiddush is as follows. You can work and you can learn and you will have lots of aveiros to your name. That's not what the Mishnah is saying. The Mishnah is not saying you won't have sins, but the drive for sin will be taken away. Now we have to understand what drive for what is the yetzer hora that he's talking about there. But there's something that changes inside of you that you're no longer pulled towards the aveiros that you were pulled to before. So he says as follows. He says, as it says in Tehillim, it brings a proof that the word avon means the yetzer hora itself, doesn't mean sins. As it says in Tehillim, Hashem said, I created man be'avoin, with sin. So the non-Jewish will translate that man was born in sin. They don't believe that you were born neutral. You were born in sin and now you need atonement. But the actual explanation of that verse is, Hashem created you with a yetzer hora. The moment you were born, avon came. That avon, that name, avon is a name given to a person's yetzer hora. Okay, what does a baby want to do as soon as it's born? And which yetzer hora speak the loudest first? It's just sustenance. She just wants to stay alive. Okay, wants to eat. And then, whatever, we'll see. Okay, so now he says as follows. Okay, so the pshat in the Mishnah is a fascinating thing, that the Mishnah is giving you a recipe that if you put Torah together with a livelihood, there's a drive inside of you which becomes nullified, goes away. He says like this, how does this work? Because you are exhausting yourself in learning and in earning a livelihood, lo yishlot alav yetzer hora. The yetzer hora can't dictate your life to you, doesn't take control of you. It's not just that you consumed and too busy. Something else goes on. Okay, we're going to see. So he says, because you are exhausting yourself, let's call it, or consumed, yagaya bat Torah v'melacha, in Torah and in work, lo yishlot alav yetzer hora, this drive can't get a grip on you. It can't move to be the center of your life. Ki b'chol eis asher lo yiyeh dashein v'shamein, because at any moment where you are not living it up and gluttonous, dashein v'shamein is like the classic keywords, like for like just like living the good life, you know, just living the fat of it, like just fat and I don't know how else to translate it. All the while that you're not lying in a hammock, smoking your cigar and drinking your drink. Lo ye'erav loy la'sos aveiros. It can't tempt you to do aveiros. V'lachein yasuk b'Torah, and then he says, therefore you should learn Torah. But let's stop there. I don't want to get distracted by the rest of his words for now. Let's stop with that. So he's got a very fascinating, deep insight into the way human works. He says there's a yetzer hora inside of you, but its only place where it can take hold of you and start to speak to you and tempt you and pull you into its world is when you are idle and living it up. Then it drags you into its net and schleps you into the life that it wants you to live. But if you're not in that, if you are in a life where there is momentum in your life, where you are exhausting yourself with being productive in learning and in melacha and in your trade, that yetzer hora can't speak. It doesn't have a foothold in your life. It can't grip you. So what he's saying is something it's profound. I want to just say, he's saying that a person who is working hard and learning hard, you block the entry point for these negative yetzer horas to even move you in your life. They can't. It's a different life. A person who has a life where they are really pursuing a livelihood and really pursuing greatness in Torah, there's no space in their life for these drives for women and food, which are the core basic yetzer horas of just keeping you alive and enjoying life. That there's no space for them. They're not interesting. They're distractions from actually what you really have your eyes set on, and that there's no place for that yetzer hora to speak to you. It's an, I don't know, in a simple way, what you were saying, if you just think of your own lives, you have like people, you'll say like you were too busy to eat. Okay? Now, it's more than just being busy. It's actually the eating wasn't interesting. What was interesting was the work. The work was so captivating and so that you forgot to eat. Eating was a nuisance. It wasn't interesting. You weren't dreaming about the, whatever, the hangover burger with the egg and the bacon and all that stuff. It just wasn't interesting at that time. You want to get a quick McDonald's, put on the table, whatever it is, and go. Want to make it quick. Because what you're engaged in is speaking to you in a much louder way, that those sugyas become secondary sugyas in your life. Those issues become secondary matters. They aren't at the fore because they're distractions from the... I'm saying explanations now, which I don't think Rabbi Yonah said, but in a simple way, that they're distracting me from what I'm interested in. My heart is caught up in something far more interesting than those things, but it's about... are you with me? But they're a product of work. It's the work which pushes out those desires. It helped me to understand those two drives in my life were never central, and I could never understand why. And I'm just going to explain to you. When he asked me the question, it hit me very hard, and I thought wow, I can't even relate. I can't relate to it. I don't understand it. I couldn't work it out. Once I saw this Rabbi Yonah, I actually understood it completely. My world was built on chemdas mammon. That was like the driving force in my life was, if you take the Rambam's perpetual, his midas thing, on the one hand you have laziness, and on the other hand you have chemdas mammon. The chemdas mammon makes you a workaholic. When you're a workaholic, food is not interesting. It's just not interesting. You go the whole day and forget to eat. I couldn't relate to his question. But I couldn't relate, it's just because my world was built on a different yetzer, a very different one, and that yetzer has no place in its space for the drive for food, and I think the drive for woman follows in exactly the same way. The Maharal says in his explanation of this Mishnah that work quells directly the drive for woman. I imagine in much the same way that Rabbi Yonah says it, but he says that lustful drive, when a person's shifted their life and they've moved to a world where what they're interested in for whatever reason is hard work. Learning Torah is hard work. As you know, most people would rather do anything than apply their mind to learn for an hour. Okay, going to the office is not just ticking a box. If you're going to the office to work hard, those completely quell and close the door on food and woman becoming the center of your life. But he says, Lo yamoid bottle, you shouldn't remain idle, because if you build an idle life, penis aneg, what happens is you start to enjoy. V'ram levavoi, then you get arrogant. V'shachach es Hashem Elokav, then you forget God, then all the yoke's gone, and your life disappears. Vayishman, Yeshurun, Vayivat, you get fat. Like the Pasuk says, Jewish people got fat, and then they rebelled against God. The yetzer really got a grip on them, and they went away. Okay, so the Rabbi Yonah's got a recipe. I don't want to say I've got the answer yet, because I have a very difficult question inside of my head, which I want to share with you. Maybe we'll answer for next week. But it's this. The Mishnah's recipe is that if you want to move the negative yetzer horas, the yetzer horas for lust, for food, the Maharal says also for avodah zarah, which we don't really have anymore, those three, there's no shelo lishmas in those. You can't use those, not allowed to. If you want to move those out of your life, the Mishnah says you've got to put hard work into your life, and you've got to put hard work in Torah and in a livelihood. But a person who has this as the central part of their life, and this is really the question to leave you with, if they have that as the central part of their life, then Rabbi Yonah says you've got to know that their life is built on atzlus. Those drives only get a grip on you if you have a tendency not to work, if you have a tendency to sit and be idle and enjoy. If your goal in life is enjoyment, that's when it gets a grip. So how do you, John, are you guys with me? That's what Rabbi Yonah is saying. The festering wound for the drive for food or for woman is idleness, which means the person, if that is the center of one's life, it means that the core of who you are is actually on the idle side of life. So how do you tell that person to work hard? How do you tell them to go and learn for 4 hours a day? That that's not who they are. Are you with me? It doesn't solve the problem. It helps you to understand how a person on the other extreme won't feel those urges so loudly in their life. But it doesn't help the person who's stuck on the left-hand side in the Idleness pit, where all those yetzer hora speak very loudly to him. And the Mishnah says, I've got a great solution for you. Shh! Become a workaholic and a learnaholic. I mean, that's cruel. For that person, that's the hardest work in the world for them to do. How do you move them? Because if you could move them, you will solve the biggest riddle of their life. You will allow them to build the most productive, magnificent, beautiful life, but you've got to get them out of this pot and move them to the other side. That's our question, and hopefully we'll explore a little bit next week. Okay.